Hello, and welcome to the Outdoorsy Diva podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, the Outdoorsy Diva. Thanks for joining. Hey there, adventurers. So this week we are going to talk about national parks. It's National Park Week, so in celebration of this week, we're going to talk about why you should plan a visit to a national park. What's the point? What do you get out of it? For some people, national parks is simply a way of life for them. They grew up going to them, visiting them, and they know all about them. But for lots and lots of people, including myself, national parks is not something that I was familiar with growing up, and it's not something I really discovered until I got much older. Of course, I had heard of places like Yellowstone or Yosemite, but I really didn't know and understand the depth and breadth of our national park system here in the United States. So they have this week that's designated as National Park Week. Earth Day is a part of that week, and they have other themed weeks. But the whole point is simply to celebrate our national parks, celebrate the history, and encourage people to get out and visit them. Now, one of the reasons I personally love incorporating national parks into my travels is because usually a lot of them are free to go to, and the ones that aren't free, it's a pretty minimal fee to go. So it's budget friendly. And that's one of the things that I love about it. Whenever I'm going somewhere now in the United States for any type of domestic trip, including the territories, don't forget those. But anytime I'm doing some domestic travel, I actually go on the National Park website and do a search for where I'm going or where I may drive through for what national parks may be in the area. Now let's clear something up about what constitutes a quote unquote national park. There are some purists who only want to reference the 62 actual parks that have national park in the name. And those are the ones that they consider to be our national parks. I'm not one of those people. I think that's stupid. I think it's just as important to patronize the entire national park system. And so the system is comprised of over 400 different types of sites. So this includes, the national parks as well as national preserves, battlefields, there's national seashores, all kinds of memorials, there's forts, gardens. There are all different types of national park designated sites throughout our beautiful country. So with over 400, why limit them? I feel like people just look for a reason to be elitist, to be separatist. Oh, it's not the 62, it doesn't count. That's stupid. Stop that. So I think it's perfectly fine for you to claim those others as your visits, and you should. Why not? Take a picture with those national park signs and rep where you've been and be proud of it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with including the other 400 plus sites in your counts to the national parks as your visits. So anyway, getting back to the list. So yeah, I always look for somewhere, within the vicinity of where I'm going to be that may be a national park site. And if it's something that looks cool, looks interesting, then I add it to my visit. Now, personal preference, I'm not into the battlefields. Like, that's not my thing. It's not my jam. I probably won't ever include one of those. But, the preserves, the parks, the memorials, I've gone to lots of those. I actually sat here and tried to count. And here's the thing. So like Washington, D.C., literally, if you've ever been anywhere on the National Mall, you've probably been to multiple national park designated sites and you didn't even realize it. Like, a lot of the memorials are their own designated site. But when I sat and I tried to count, it looks like I've been to, yes, I'm literally looking at the list right now, 25. If I count all of the individual sites of DC, it would put me at 25 because that came to like 12 there that I've been to. If we just count, the Washington Memorial or the National Mall as one. Well, no, you can't do that because this includes Thomas Jefferson, the Lincoln Memorial, the MLK Memorial, Theodore Roosevelt. I mean, they're all their own separate things. So never mind, we'll leave them separate. So that's how they're listed on the website, and that's what we're going to say. So to date, I believe I've been to 25 known national park sites. And I say known because it's quite possible I've been to one or two and didn't realize it was actually considered a national park site, but 25 that I know about. So now the second reason that I think you should incorporate national parks is the obvious one. The beauty. They're absolutely beautiful. We have so much beauty in our country, and I actually feel like that's one thing we got right. Kinda. We won't go into the history of land theft and taking land from our native people. That's a whole other topic that really deserves its own discussion. However, in the current climate that we're in, the fact that we do have this land that is considered part of the United States, and we did designate places as being, national park sites that people can't hunt on, you can't pollute, you can't drill, you can't harm. That part is a good thing that we do have these designated places where beauty and nature can abound pretty much, uninterrupted by humans. And so you have the amazing waterfalls in different parks, streams, mountains, beaches, whatever your fancy for what you love about the outdoors, you can definitely find in one of our national park sites. I mean, the beaches like Cape Canaveral, the Canaveral National Seashore in Florida, that is a beautiful stretch of beach along the Atlantic. And what's really cool is that you can see the launch pads from the beach. So how many beaches have you been to where you can say that, and then you have the dry tortugas down in the Keys, which don't get me started. I'm so bummed. That was really a trip I was looking forward to in 2020, as well as finally officially going to the Everglades National Park. Both of those are now on hold. We'll see what happens with COVID and if I'm able to get those in this year. My goal is to try to get in, at least 2 to 3 new national park sites under my belt per year. Last year, I checked off Great Smoky Mountain National Park. I also checked off the Gateway National Archway in St. Louis, as well as the DeSoto Memorial in Florida. So I got quite a few in on last year doing a lot of my travels. So in any case, the beauty makes it absolutely, worth a side trip. No matter where you're going, what the purpose of your road trip, you can plan in a day. That's how I do it. I don't necessarily plan an entire trip with a national park in mind unless it's somewhere huge. I mean, even Yellowstone, the reason I was able to visit Yellowstone last year is because I actually went to Montana for a conference. As soon as I heard where the conference was, my gut was like, oh, is that close to Yellowstone? Is it close to Glacier? Where are we? What part of the state is it going to be in? I have to make sure I get in one of these parks while I'm there. And it wasn't logistically easy, but how could I be that close to the majestic Yellowstone and not go? It was like a 3.5-hour drive. And I just tacked on a couple of extra days to my trip to make sure that we could make it happen. And it was worth it, amazing. My only regret, honestly, is that I didn't have enough time. I felt like 2 days was rushed. And that's a great episode for you to listen to. Go listen to that Yellowstone camping episode. You will be entertained, I promise. Now, the third reason that I think you should visit a national park, it's fungicational. These sites are full of history. A lot of them have gotten a lot better about including the native history about the native peoples, the people who were the original caretakers of this land. So you and your kids can definitely learn a lot while you're there. A lot of these memorials, you learn things that you may not have necessarily known. So it's pretty cool, pretty worth it. One of my favorite sites is the Fort, what is it called? Fort Matanzas. It's the Fort Matanzas National, I believe it's a national memorial site. It's in St. Augustine. So what's cool about Fort Matanzas is that when you get there, there's like boardwalks and it's on a marsh, like along this river. And it's free, and there's a ferry that you actually have to take to get over to the fort, which I just think is super cool that you have this fort that's actually out there like in the middle of the water. And so you take the fort and you get to go over. They've left it, you know, and set it up to where how it would have looked back then. And you learn the history about how you got this fort here out in the middle of the water, you know, how they built it, why they built it, its relationship to the history of St. Augustine, you know, the nation's oldest city. And it's really, really cool. And along the way, you're going to see dolphins in the waterway, all types of wildlife. It's just a really cool site. So don't sleep on the memorials and think that, oh, it's just some dumb, boring. They're not. And especially I find the forts to be really, really cool. I'm not into the battlefields, but the forts, I don't know, they intrigue me. I think they're really neat. The next reason to visit a national park, the wildlife. I mean, the wildlife that you have the potential to see is going to be abundant because this is a protected area, right? You know, you're not gonna be able to hunt in these lands. Like I said, you know, they can't drill, they can't cut down the trees. So the habitat for the animals is intact, which you don't get everywhere. And so that means the wildlife can thrive. You know, I was so thrilled to see elk and you know, coyotes, and I didn't see the wolves, but I heard them in Yellowstone. You know, you have the bears, and I did see one black bear in the Great Smoky Mountains. So you're gonna have wildlife being able to be wild and do what they do. So if you're a wildlife lover, if you're a birder, you know, if you're a photographer that's into wildlife photography like me, that's a great opportunity for you to see wildlife, you know, thriving in their natural habitat, is to visit one of these national parks. And did you know that you can purchase wildlife photography from some of my favorite trips and sites, including some of my visits to the national parks? You can go to outdoorsyddiva.com, go to the menu, click photography, and you can make that purchase today. And so the last reason is simply this: they're vacation worthy. A lot of the national parks actually do have accommodations where you can go camping. Some of them have lodges. So it is worth it to plan a trip explicitly to visit a national park, especially some of those big of the 62 national parks. They're definitely vacation worthy, definitely somewhere worth looking into. So when you're thinking about planning that trip, road trip, family trip, solo trip, girls trip, even whatever type of trip you're planning, you know, don't sleep on the national parks. And the best resource, honestly, is going to be the National Park Service website itself. It's extensive. I actually think this is something they do an amazing job with as far as breaking down where the parks are, what you can do in each park, what's allowed, what's not allowed, how to plan your visit. They are an excellent resource. So when I'm planning a trip, I start there. Now, there are tons of other sites, you know, that are also very helpful. National Park Trust is actually the foundation site that supports the national parks. They are also a wealth of information. And then you have other amazing bloggers like myself who put this stuff out there, who curate itineraries and guides for you to the national parks. I have two. I have one on Yellowstone, and then I have one about all of the national parks in Florida. So you can definitely check those out on the site, and I'll have those links down in the show notes. So I say all that to say, our national parks are amazing, they're beautiful, and they are a gift. And when I visit the national parks, you know, especially as a Black American citizen, I have to say, 9 times out of 10, I'm the only one. me and my son, if he's with me, I know never is a strong word, but I never see other people who look like me when I'm out there in the parks. Actually, my visit to the Great Smoky Mountain National Park last fall was actually the first time I had ever been on a trail and encountered another Black family. And I encountered one of all the trails we explored for the weekend. And I don't, there's a nuanced response to that, right? That someone could probably give you more eloquently as to why we don't. And I don't have the answers. It's socioeconomic. It's all kinds of reasons of why we don't. And I think in large part, my job is really just to make sure there's no barriers as far as why we don't. I want people to feel like they feel comfortable, because I feel like for a lot of us, we automatically think of the national parks as being this whitewashed space, that it's something that white people do. And I want to get away from that narrative. I want to prove that narrative false, that no, our national parks are for everyone, that you're welcome there, that you're safe there, that you won't be bothered or harassed there, that you will feel like you belong there just as much as everyone else that you see. And that's my message. I think the national parks are completely underrated, underserved, and undervisited, by my particular demographic. I'm in another travel group, and they claim that we have someone in that group who's literally been everywhere around the world. And they started a thread for national parks and who's been. And I have to say, for a group with such well-traveled people, there were so few of us who've been to the national parks. And I hope to see that change. So as I continue to plan my own trips to the parks, tell you about them, share the pictures, just hopefully I can get people excited about getting out, getting into our national parks, patronizing our national park system, and taking advantage of this beauty that we have. So you guys stay safe, stay healthy. During this time of COVID, one cool thing, most of the national parks are, if not completely closed, visitation is extremely limited. So obviously follow the recommendations and guidelines that are set forth. But for now, the great thing is technology, and there are tons of ways you can explore our national parks digitally. If you go on the national park website, they have all kinds of cool virtual things going on right now. I follow a lot of the individual parks on Insta and Facebook, and a lot of them have live cams. And it's been really cool to see, the wildlife without us humans interfering and visiting. They're like taking over, having the time of their lives without us there. So definitely encourage you to do that also during this time of stay at home. So you guys be blessed and stay healthy. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, make sure you subscribe to the Outdoorsy Diva podcast. Be sure to check out Misadventures of an Outdoorsy Diva blog on outdoorsydiva.com. You can also keep up with me and my adventures, so check out all of my social channels. Find Outdoorsy Diva on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest.